I think what's important to know is that we have an important failsafe pretty much across the country right now. There's only one state that is still using voting technology that doesn't produce a paper ballot for the voter to look at.
Welcome to the Practivist Pod, the practice of activism made practical.
Today we've got a wild week to discuss as we're still reveling in our election day wins while grappling with the repercussions of the end of the budget fight.
Then, as Trump continues to make false claims about our elections, we talk about how safe our voting systems actually are with the president and CEO of Verified Voting, Pamela Smith.
I'm Jess Craven.
I'm Steve Pearson.
Stay strong. It won't be long. Yeah. We will
And we're back to a rather more chastened tone of voice than we were last week, Steve.
No, I don't want to leave my celebratory, tone of voice away. And that's what makes... Okay, first, please find us on Substack. Got to take care of the business.
Yeah,
we get the ad-free version there. Please, we need your support there. We'd be grateful for it. Also, if you're wherever you're finding us, there's a subscribe or a follow or whatever that button is. Go ahead and click that. Yes, I refuse to have my joy robbed by 7 Democrats and 1 independent in the Senate who egregiously and spinelessly acquiesced to the Trump regime. And what is so frustrating to me is that we had all this great feeling, and we still do, these enormous wins. You and I, we are around these activists and volunteers who have been either newly engaged or doing this work for a very long time, and they have been despondent, they've been scared, they've been exhausted, burnt out, but putting one foot in front of the other nonetheless. And we saw the results of them showing up, even when they maybe didn't feel that hope in their heart in the elections just a week ago, just a little over a week ago, with, crazy overperforming all over our country. And to have the narrative that Dems are now in disarray and Dems are spineless and, all of that in just a week ripped into our psyche by these 8 senators. It's beyond frustrating. I'm infuriated by it. It was an absolute, to be generous, miscalculation, but just I hope they understand now the deep damage they have done to our base, to our movement, to donors, who have been waiting to see Democrats show a spine and Democrats come up with a plan to win. I work in fundraising with my organization. That's what I hear from donors all the time. They're sitting on their hands. I'm not giving a dime to Democrats until I see them showing a spine and I see their plan to win. Well, we had both of that a week ago, and I literally got an email yesterday saying, I am not giving a dime to Democrats until Schumer resigns, and if that doesn't happen, then I'm going to give money to every Republican running against a Democrat. So...
Well, that does not sound like a good faith donor to me. That is absurd.
No, he was not. He was not. But it's just to make my point,
that's fuck that guy. Sorry, Steve, but
fuck that guy. Exactly.
Yeah, whatever. If that's, I got no interest in people like that. But I understand you're a fundraiser. I'm not. So, I think
I'm not really a fundraiser. I guess I am, but that's what I do. Yes.
Schumer needs to step down. It's the first response I had. It is, and we've talked about this a million times. I am happy to say that, I've been calling, not that anyone cares what I say, but I have been saying Schumer needs to step down for at least a year seriously. And really before that, I've never been a fan of his leadership, but it's hit a critical point. This was a debacle. So even if there is some kind of wrong-headed strategy about what just happened, once again, the way it played out was disastrous. It makes us look flat-footed. It makes us look like we're, one side is not talking to the other. Either Schumer knew what was happening and went along with it and betrayed people that way, or he didn't know and he's a failed leader. Either way, he is not in control of the narrative, and that in and of itself is enough to mean he needs to go. And yeah, if I were a donor right now, especially a big, important donor, I would be saying loudly, I will not give another dime until he is stepped down. Obviously, they're not going to listen to us. They're going to listen to people with money. But we should also all be saying it to our senators. Indivisible has come out and said, we will not support any senator in a primary who has not called for him to step down. And we're starting to hear new candidates. Mallory McMorrow has called for it. A bunch of other Senate candidates have called for him to step down. And I think at last count about 10 currently seated members of the House, including California's Mike Levin, thank you, Mike, have also called for him to step down. And I hope that becomes a louder roar for him to step down. He needs to.
Yeah, I'm going to be, not to name drop, but I'm going to be at an event with Mike Levin in a couple of days. So I will make sure to thank him personally for that. And you have been consistent. I've been along with you on that. I haven't been as full-throated about Hakeem Jeffries, and I will give him credit in this too. He has kept the House caucus together through this, and we'll see what they do to fight back. They've been in D.C. this whole time, going back and forth while Republicans have been nowhere to be found. And now we will presumably have enough votes for the discharge petition on the Epstein files. Yeah, as we were recording this, there's a dump of new information about Epstein too. A lot of this, not a lot of it, maybe all of this, shutdown and refusal to bring Congress back in session by Mike Johnson has been simply to cover up the Epstein files and make an excuse to not swear in a duly elected Democratic member. And now it's all coming out. We're just seeing the trickles of it right now. But this is going to be I'll luxuriate in the Schadenfreude. Someone corrected me on how I pronounce that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Schadenfreude of it all, because it's going to be another really bad week for Trump. Yeah. And I'll say this too, holding people's, food assistance hostage, through this is about the most heinous and egregious thing I can think of. I can't imagine any modern leader of any country doing that so brazenly, so much to the fact that when the Supreme Court, they petitioned the Supreme Court to keep them from the court mandated payments, food payments for starving children and seniors. Whatever happens through all of this and the narrative, a political narrative around the shutdown, people are not going to forget that. We're going to remind them of that.
They're still withholding. 27 million Americans have still not received their SNAP payments. The only Americans who have are people living in states with Democratic governors. I've done a lot of content about this weekend. Almost every single red state, Idaho maybe has released 50%. But other than them, Nevada has released 50%, but almost every other red state, nothing. And people are still starving over this. I mean, it's so upsetting. And yes, I think there was new approval ratings that came out today, and Trump is hemorrhaging approval ratings from Republicans on his running of the government. I think he's down to 33% approve. And it's about a lot of different things, but his having parties while people were starving, things like that. Nobody is okay with it. It's just, they're still okay with they still love his immigration. I mean, whatever, because they're sadists and racist, but even Republicans are really falling away from him on the shutdown, the way that was handled, the using SNAP as punishment. I hope we never let a single person forget it ever. It is the most sadistic thing I have ever seen a governmental administration do in a quote unquote, democracy, in one of the richest nations in the world. I mean, it's one thing if you see this happening in a country where we know the government is deeply corrupt and, and in an autocracy, but to see that in this country, a president deliberately withholding food to achieve legislative ends, which, by the way, also are cruel and vicious.
Right.
I've never seen anything like it. And I hope I never do again, genuinely.
It's horrific. And also, I want to acknowledge, the deep pain that people are feeling over this budget that got passed. 50,000 people, actually, it's a little bit more than that, have been projected will actually die because of a lack of access to health care because of this bill. And I think you and I probably know a lot of healthcare advocates who are cancer survivors or who are, actively dealing with illness right now, who, rely on the ACA for the life-saving care that they need. And it's a really scary, and terrifying time for them. And this is what we were fighting for. And this is the thing that's so frustrating to walk away from that fight right now. Feels like we're leaving a lot of people behind. We really are. And,
we are.
Politics aside, 50,000 plus souls are going to perish because of this legislation. And, when we want our elected leaders to fight, it's not just to fight for partisan demands or to be in power. It's to fight for people who are struggling and who need the help that only the government can give them, and the government should give them. That's the function of having a government to begin with. So if you're angry about this, absolutely you have every right to be. If you're scared, we see you, we're here for you. As always, we are going to put one foot in front of the other. These midterm elections will be about healthcare. That is how we flipped the House in 2018. That was the central issue. They were trying to take away the ACA there. They've been trying to, dismantle our healthcare forever, and this is going to be the central issue that will help us flip the House in 26 as well. So we're going to keep reminding them of it and keep hope in your hearts, because we're just a week away from all of these huge wins, and that's not going to stop. It can't. We are a force to be reckoned with now. The blue wave, I'll just say it, is rolling, and you can't just stop it with a couple of really misguided and shitty votes from some Democratic senators. That wave's way too powerful.
Oh yeah, and I mean, as much as I will never forgive those 8 senators, and most of them are senators I've actively disliked anyway. But I also, it is important to focus on the fact that most Democratic senators and most of the people in the House, and again, I was there 2 weeks ago talking to them, they fought so hard on this, and we would never have had to have this fight if Republicans had not declined to extend these tax credits back in July when they were passing $4 trillion in tax cuts for the Elon Musks in this country. And we should never forget it. Like, yes, what these 8 Democrats did is fucked. But what Republicans are continuously doing every day is a factor of 50 gazillion times more fucked all the time. And we've got to be able to see that nuance and remember it, or I will speak for myself. Very important to keep that in mind.
So important. And for all of our imperfections as Democrats, the thing that frustrates us as a party, I think the most tactically when we compare ourselves to Republicans is how we are not always in lockstep with each other, and Republicans just get in line and they're on lockstep. But the reason for that is because we are, I know people hate this term, but we are a big tent party, and we welcome and celebrate that diversity of ideas, that pushback on debate is what makes us all stronger. That's, at its core, what a good government should be. So, what is frustrating the most about our party, I will also celebrate as one of the greatest strengths of our party. And we'll just keep moving forward.
Yeah. 100%.
Having said that, in terms of moving forward, let's talk about our Chop Wood, Carry Water to-do list, because we do have some things for folks to get active on.
Yeah, definitely. And this is coming up really soon, actually. So we have the chance to flip another seat in the House. On December 2nd, there is a special election to replace Mark Green, the, far-right Republican who retired shortly after voting to, strip healthcare away from God knows however many people. He was a key proponent of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, but then he's retiring. We have a great candidate. Her name is Afton Bain. She is an She came up out of Indivisible. She's still embraced by Indivisible, but she moved on to become a state lawmaker, and she's incredible. She's running against a hardcore Trump supporter who does not want the Epstein files to be released. Afton does. She's progressive. She's running on really important issues for her district, but also for the country, getting the price of groceries down, making healthcare more affordable, things like that. there is a all hands on deck Indivisible call when this comes out. This is Thursday, so it is today, Thursday, the day this episode comes out. So you can find out more information about that in our show notes. But also, Postcards to Swing States has postcards for her, Postcards to Voters does, or if you know anyone who lives in Tennessee, make sure they know this election is happening and early voting starts today. We can flip the seat. It's a long shot, but the DNC is involved, Indivisible is involved, and the DNC would never be involved if they didn't think there was an actual shot. And there is. In this moment, after what we just did last Tuesday, I know we're feeling a bit deflated right now, but we can still win this race, and imagine narrowing that Republican majority even more. How much pressure that would put on Mike Johnson. So that's a really important thing to do. So Afton Bain, please support her any way you can. Also, donations are really important. So that would be my one big call to action right now.
So exciting, really. And if you heard our interview last week with DNC Chair Ken Martin, I've been saying that our overperforming by 18 points over the last year. He corrected me and said it was actually 16 points on average. But, what we saw, I'm not sure we've added in the aggregate of last Tuesday's elections now, because we flipped some seats that have been held by Republicans for 50 years. I mean, and now we just have this one race to focus on. So let's do it. Let's flip this race and flip this seat in Tennessee. Yeah. Come on. What's the Tennessee state mascot or whatever, go.
I do not know.
I need to learn more about Tennessee. Sorry, anyone in Tennessee listening to this. Go Blue Jays. Go Tennessee Blue Jays. I'm going to make it up. I don't know.
That's not right. No, nope. Blue Jays are another state. Oh, my God.
That's Steve. Toronto. No. That's Toronto. They were just, anyway, go Tennesseers.
Big sports fans here.
Battling Tennesseers. Yeah. We're going to see, we only get calls when I say stupid shit. So we'll get some calls this week. The other thing that we want people to do, we have a link in our show notes to it, is weain'tbuyingit.com has a link to the blackout, the counter strike to Black Friday, which is coming up soon. We know how effective this has been to use the power of the purse that we have as consumers and as citizens to show that we are not going to support companies that are supporting this Trump regime. So there's a link to that too. You can find out more information there and help us put that kind of pressure on too. Two important things to do right now. So you thought you were getting a break. You got a break for a week. We didn't give you anything to do last week, but there's that.
And these are specifically, we're talking about Amazon, Target, and Home Depot, which you guys know how I feel about this. Like, we should all be boycotting all of those companies anyway. So, to the best of our ability, obviously everybody's got times they can't, but those are companies that they're asking for, I think, a 5-day blackout. But I'm going to say, let's do it all the time, guys. There's no Nothing good to be said about any of those companies. So, yeah, go for it.
They do it all the time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What song is that? Yeah. Anyway, okay, what's your reason for hope?
Oh, well, my reason for hope is that we are just finding out that Katie Wilson, a very amazing young progressive, is likely to be Seattle's next mayor. I think it's basically a fait accompli at this point. She was like 10,000 votes behind on election day because they had not counted vote by mail, and she has crept up. She is going to be replacing another Democrat, but he is a very corporate-friendly Democrat, and she's coming in there saying, I want to raise taxes on companies like Amazon, and I want to take that money and give it to people in the city who need help. And people are really excited about this. It has been really thrilling to watch the text messages start to come in. She's a young mom, and just a really amazing person. Actually, I think she's a young mom. I should retract that because I'm looking at her holding a young child, but it could be a niece or nephew. I think
could
it's
be
her
anyone's
kid.
child.
It could be a random kid she just picked up in that picture, so I retract that part. But she's young, very progressive, amazing, and that's an exciting win for us. So notch another win for progressives from last Tuesday's elections. And what about you, Steve?
That's exciting. My reason for hope is, oh my God, I'm doing it again. I should not be doing this. I apologize, everyone. My reason for hope, once again, is about the Supreme Court of the United States. I always get slapped the following week whenever I say something nice about the Supreme Court. But I will say it was they declined to hear the case challenging marriage equality, and that's something that I'm sure we've all been really, really worried about, especially after they, after Roe was repealed, and we've seen the horrible repercussions of that. We knew they would be going for marriage equality next, and so this was really hopeful that they declined to hear this case. It doesn't mean that the Republicans still aren't coming after marriage equality. We don't need to be aware of that. There is another case that is making its way through the courts right now that, according to some legal experts, has a different legal argument that might be more compelling to these justices than this particular case. But it is a win, a rare and welcome win from this Republican-controlled SCOTUS. So that's my reason for hope today.
Yay! That's a good one.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm excited for people to hear this interview. I think it's very timely because, in the midst of these huge wins, we, of course, had the President Trump, tweeting about election fraud and sending federal observers and all of that. So, we've got a nationally recognized experts on election security coming to talk about how safe our elections really are. So let's hear our interview with Pamela Smith. A nationally recognized expert on election security for over 20 years, Pamela Smith is the president and CEO of Verified Voting, where she works on safeguarding elections and advocating for secure and fair voting processes. She is also a member of the National Task Force on Election Crises, a diverse cross-partisan group, I should say, of more than 50 experts. Pam, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure.
Exciting day.
It is an exciting day. We should jump right into it because as we're recording this, it's the day after our nationwide elections that fared very, very well for Democrats. Of course, even before the votes came in here in California, Trump was tweeting about the election being rigged and that the DOJ would be looking into illegal activities. So I just want to ask you, how did the elections actually go yesterday? And what's he talking about?
Yeah, the elections actually went smoothly. Right? So there's always an and with elections. No such thing as a perfect election.
Okay.
At Verified Voting, we participate actively every year with the Election Protection Coalition. We do that year around, and this year was no exception. The 1-866 Our Vote hotline is often sort of the first signal you might get if there's an issue arising at a polling place. and they had a record number of calls yesterday for an off-cycle election.
Yeah.
And
which correlates to a record turnout, really, for an off-cycle election,
exactly,
too. Yeah.
Exactly. And there are teams of people whose job it is to sort of verify those issues and ensure that action is taken to address them so voters can keep voting. And that matters because there's a big difference between an election that's resilient to the kinds of things that can go wrong and one that isn't. That means there is like a plan B, that you have something to resolve the problem so voters can keep voting. And when I say smooth, that's what I mean. Voters don't have to be turned away because of an issue that came up in the polling place. And that's what we saw yesterday. There was a lot of preparation that went into making sure it went smoothly, and that paid off.
Only things that I saw as, just an observer, obviously there were some bomb threats in New Jersey that turned out to not be credible, but that closed some polling places and led them to extend the voting hours in those places.
Yeah.
And then, the administration sent out his own election observers. I think that there was a lot of concern about intimidation at polling places, especially in immigrant communities here in California, that there would be some ICE activity around that. What did you see in that regard?
There was very limited reports of ICE activity near-ish to a polling site. One of the advantages we have in California is that we have a number of days to vote. We have early voting. We have a lot of options for voting. Everyone gets a vote by mail ballot, so they can drop that off or mail it in, or they can go in one of the early days and vote. And what that does is it relieves the pressure on an election day. There's a lot of polling places. Even if you just pick one county, there's a lot of polling places. And it would be, I think, difficult to challenge all of those polling places at once, but even more difficult to do that over a number of days. And so we have that safeguard kind of built in. And I always urge people to vote early if they can. Even so, with a record turnout opportunity, when people had something they were very interested in voting on, we did see actually long lines. I don't think it was expected to see that high of a turnout. All honesty.
No, I went to a group, and actually I hate to be a prognosticator because I'm almost always wrong, first of all, so I should just stop doing it. But someone asked me what I thought the turnout would be, and I was like, for a special election with only one ballot measure, and that's it, and such a short runway to get people educated about it. My guess was like 18 to 20%. It was my guess, and
that would have been a reasonable guess.
That's reasonable, right? I mean, we're not great at voting, sadly, and so to see that turnout and have it, I guess about a third of the voting electorate voted, and hour and a half, 2 hour lines for a proposition, for a ballot measure.
For a single issue.
It was pretty exciting. And so, of course, we handled it. We do really well with our elections here in California. There are a lot of conspiracy theories spread around about our voting systems and alleged voting fraud that has been, they've been systematically disproven, but these claims have sown doubt about the integrity of our voting systems from both parties, whether people are worried about vote by mail because Trump has said vote by mail is so bad, or I like to drop my ballot in a drop box, and here in California we have drop boxes. I did that, and someone said I don't trust the drop boxes. Elon Musk tweeted that anything can be hacked. So you're the expert. Let me just ask you, can our elections be hacked? What's the current state of our election tech?
I think what's important to know is that we have an important fail-safe pretty much across the country right now. There's only one state that is still using voting technology that doesn't produce a paper ballot for the voter to look at. Just one state.
What state?
That's Louisiana.
Louisiana.
And they're working on it.
Okay.
Yeah. But all of the other states have either ballots that we hand mark, like our absentee ballots, or we do that in person in a polling place. They get counted by a scanner. It totals up the votes. Those paper ballots are there to check to make sure that the vote count was right. So let's say there was a programming error, even. It doesn't even have to be a hack. Let's say there was just an error in programming. But voters had a chance to check on that physical ballot that their vote was marked the way they intended. Then you can use those for an audit or a recount. An audit is just a way of saying we're checking to make sure the count was right. And that's essential because that's the remedy, regardless of whether there's an error or whether it was intentional, some kind of malfeasance, hacking. You have that fail-safe. And fortunately, most of the country is doing some kind of post-election audit on the regular, right? You know, that it's a matter of course. It's not the same as a recount where you need to have a candidate who's willing to say, yeah, I'd like a recount. That doesn't always happen. And recount laws can be strict. Sometimes it's just tied to how, you know, is it a narrow margin? And if so, we'll do a recount. But audits happen regardless of whether it's a partisan contest or not. And they're standardized. And so that means every time there's a vote count, there's somebody checking the vote count. There's still gaps, right? You still want to make sure that all of those laws harmonize and the rules are safe. But the majority of people have that physical ballot they could check. And that's your way to safeguard your own vote. And it's election officials' way to demonstrate that the count was right.
Yeah. I think that it's a lot of misinformation about that because I hear people who are like, we really need to go back to paper ballots. And I say we actually are there. We have paper ballots, and worry about here in California, our big electronic voting machines are literally just like vote marking machines. That's all they do is they mark a paper ballot up. That's right. To then be processed.
Yeah, it's important to do that checking that voters know this is your ballot. Sometimes if you're marking using a screen, you might not be paying attention to the printout, right? Like if you go shopping and don't look at your receipt, you want to look at that physical ballot because that's what counts in a recount or an audit. So that's your confirmation that it was right. If it wasn't right, you tell the poll worker and say, this didn't work out. I want to start over. And technology is technology. It's not that it can't break. It's not that it can't be tampered with. We put a lot of safeguards in place to prevent that. But that all-important remedy is to check after the fact. Voters to check their ballots and election officials to check their counts. So I think that's what people don't realize. We did some studies about post-election audits, and we talked to voters in a number of different states. And we asked them, how did you vote? Oh, I voted by mail. I voted in person. I voted on a machine. And then we said, what happens to your ballot after that? And they started thinking about it, and they're like, I don't really know. I mean, I guess they put them all together and count them. And then what happens? I hope somebody checks, right? They didn't even have that sense of, is there an audit? Is there a check that happens?
Right.
The good news is we're able to tell them, yes, in fact, there is. And in your state, it's a very strong, robust type of audit. But I think that's the thing. Voters only interact with elections every so often, right? This was an odd-numbered year, and record turnout. Voters have a lot of awareness now of what's going on, but really most voters are doing this every 2 to 4 years.
Yeah.
So there's no reason for them to know all the ins and outs, but the news is generally positive.
Well, with all of the lack of education about that and the misinformation that is out there, let's talk about the even numbered year that's coming up. It is clear that this is a historically unpopular administration. The results of last night's elections underscore that for sure. It's also clear that Republicans know they can't win without undermining the process and disenfranchising voters. I know that you work for a nonpartisan organization, but the fact that they have, started this mid-decade gerrymandering war just underscores that point. They're very unpopular. They're going to do whatever they can to disenfranchise or, tweak the process and to spread misinformation about voting. So how can we best prepare for the challenges that we will certainly be facing in the upcoming midterms?
Yeah. Well, I think doing things like what you're doing with podcasts and informing people is really important. People need to hear from folks they trust how elections work. People need to be engaged, be active. One good way to be active in elections is to volunteer to be a poll worker. Mm-hmm. You will be paid, but it's not a lot, so it's kind of like volunteer work. But you get to see elections from the inside out when you're being a poll worker, and you're part of something much bigger than yourself. You're part of this exercise of democracy. And I think that that's really crucially important. Whatever else folks do, at least one time in their lives, they should be poll workers.
I think waiters too. I think everyone should be a waiter one time in their life as well. But
oh my God, you're my kindred spirit. Having waited tables and worked retail, I have opinions about that too. Look, it's about the real world, right? We're living in this world of artifice where, half of the traffic on the internet is generated by bots, maybe more than half. And how do you distinguish what's real and what isn't when you're getting bombarded with all these messages all the time? And it's really about engaging with one another and participating. One of the best ways you can participate is to vote. As far as what the preparations are that need to happen as we go into the coming year, anywhere where voters are living in a jurisdiction where they're using a machine to mark, where all voters are presented with a machine for marking their ballots, we usually run a campaign, like a social media campaign in those jurisdictions to get people to check their ballots. It's straightforward. It's simple. Check your ballot, check your vote. Everywhere voters need to be registered, and they need to stay up to date on their registration, even though you've done it once. Do you really have to do anything again? Well, yes, if you moved, and yes, if you need to update it, but also just check your registration. There's ways to do that online all across the country. And if anything is wrong, you get to find out ahead of time if maybe your name was removed from the voter rolls for some unknown reason. And if that was intentional, well, you can go and resolve that problem. If it wasn't and something went wrong with the system, by you checking in with the election official, you're letting them know that something might be wrong. Either way, check your registration. When you vote, check your vote. And if you're in a place where they're using ballot tracking, sign up for ballot tracking, because you'll know when your ballot's on its way to you. You'll know when they've received it. You'll know when they counted it. You get that information. And if anything was wrong, like you forgot to sign the thing or you needed to take some other action, they can reach out to you using ballot tracking. So that's crucially important. I think voters knowing that there's ways they can safeguard their own vote is really important. Sharing that information, even better. And the rules vary from one state to another, but the 1-866-OUR-VOTE hotline is there for everybody. Our website, we have maps that show you what kind of voting system's in use in your jurisdiction. You can familiarize yourself with it if you've never voted before. And just there's a lot of information out there. But I think everyone's hungry for that, hungry for actions that they could take, things they could do to safeguard their own vote and the votes of their friends and colleagues.
Yeah, that's great advice. And we'll definitely put a link to your website up on our show notes page so people can find it. And I love the ballot tracking feature we have here in California.
So good.
I get a text when the ballot's on its way. I get a text when it's in the mailbox, and I get a text when they've received it. It's feels great. I'll ask you one more question. This is the question that we ask all of our guests that we finish up with. What is giving you the most hope right now?
I'm going to say massive turnout in an off year.
Yeah.
Gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah.
I think, look, whatever your politics, right? Everybody wants to know that their vote was counted fairly, no matter who you vote for. That's why our work is nonpartisan. You need to know that it was right, whether you won or lost. And so having those kinds of tools in place where we can check, where we are doing our best to safeguard the vote and safeguard one another in voting, I think is really crucial. And seeing folks standing in line, but not, oh my gosh, I have to stand in a line, but it was joyous.
Yeah.
It was purposeful. It was purposeful and intentional. And I think that engagement with one another and with the process of supporting democracy in a time when, it's sort of under siege, I think is really a hopeful sign.
Me too. That turnout it just really, as I said, exceeded my expectations in a major way all over the country and gave me a tremendous amount of hope. So, Pamela, thank you so much for the really important work that you do, especially in the face of so many people trying to denigrate what is, a very safe, secure, and amazing voting system that we have here all over the country. So thank you for your work, and thanks so much for being on the Practivist Pod.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget that all of the links for our actions are in the show notes, so don't just listen, click those links and take action. Please subscribe, rate, and review our show on Apple, YouTube, or wherever you're listening, and share our show with your friends and family members, and make sure they are taking action to help us win. And if you're able to support our show on Substack, we'd be very grateful for that, and you will get an ad-free feed of our show as well. We'll be back next week with more Practivist Pod, and until then, don't forget, hope is an action.
Oh, no.